Who's at fault here? Let's start with Jared. It's always the concrete guys.
So I do agree with Jared.
Bang.
It's mostly the concrete guy's fault.
Water seepage in your metal building. Is it a metal building problem or a concrete problem? Let's find out.
Back at the Wolf.
Welcome back, Pack. This is Advil from WolfSteel Buildings, and this is MetalTalks, and this is episode number 2. And today I'm here with building manager Jared and concrete manager Willie to discuss a water seepage problem, which is actually really common, okay? But before we get into the issue, I just want to introduce Jared. I know you actually were a part of the Metal Talks episode 1 where we spoke about
The basic walk-in door.
Oh, yes, the mobile home doors. Don't forget to check that out. That was our very first episode. Jared, excited to have you back, man. How you doing today?
Good. I got my coffee. That's all I need.
Ready to go. And Willie, welcome to the channel. Talk to me. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing great. Really excited to be part of this channel and to start talking some concrete.
Now, I know you have a lot of experience, and that's what's going to make this episode really, really well, because this is a water seepage issue that is very, very common in the industry. And right here, we're going to have building manager and concrete manager face off to determine who's at fault here. Now, before we get into that, let's talk about Metal Talks. Metal Talks was created because we see and hear about the nightmares, frustrations, and challenges in the metal building industry. We pull the problems directly from social media, from like our YouTube comments, or even from our emails and our own experiences, and we break them down here.
So this is just our opinion based on experience. If you don't like it, leave it in the comments or go grab a coffee and a beer, right?
Yeah.
But for the most part, we're just pretty much talking metal buildings. Hey, and if you have any, like I said, comments, leave them in the comments section. And who knows, maybe you might have a better solution, right, to these problems.
Yeah. There's always an opportunity for learning, for growth. I know we are constantly learning, constantly. So yeah, again, we're just Texas metal builders. Voicing our opinions on the internet. And that's it. Okay. All right. So again, we're going to talk about what is the issue? What is our opinion on the issue? How would we solve the problem at stake? And then the final one is, does WolfSteel prevent this? Or can WolfSteel improve? Okay. So let's start with the issue. The comment says, our detached garage keeps getting flooded. We already put the Lexel and Flex Seal in the perimeter of the garage inside and outside. The concrete guys messed up on the dimensions of the slab and they didn't put a slope away from the garage doors. Even though we changed the doors seal, water is still getting through from the corners of the doors. What else can we use to water seal the corners of the garage door? So that is the issue at stake. Alrighty, so it's very easy to blame the last person who touched it. So in this case, there's a lot of factors. We're going to talk about what could have caused this and how could we solve this. But the problem starts from the very bottom usually, and that's from the very, very beginning. And that's what we mean by that. So this is why we get into concrete here at WolfSteel Buildings, is to help bridge that communication with builders and concrete. Alrighty, so let's get to what is our opinion on the issue, or what is our opinion on the problem at stake. Okay, so this is concrete versus metal building. What do you guys think? Who's at fault here? Let's start with Jared. Who's at fault?
It's always the concrete guys. That's the number one thing in construction. It's always the concrete guys messing up. Always blame the finger at them. And then the builders, we never make mistakes. Nah, I'm just kidding. But I do think it did stem necessarily from concrete in this situation, as far as maybe it doesn't have a notch detail or a ramp. And especially around the doors, that's probably the biggest place, to get right as far as notching goes, where the weakest point, kind of what this customer is probably experiencing is around the corners of the overhead door or the garage door, roll-up door. doesn't really matter. They both, as far as sealing goes, kind of have the same weakness where it's the corners. So any water that gets on that door, it kind of comes down, and without a notch detail, where that little weather stripping is, you can kind of see it in the picture there. It comes down, compresses, but there's no weather stripping between the door and the frame. So let's say you got a level concrete or even a bigger concrete, right? Comes down, goes right in through those corners. So, it's a little hard to tell from the picture, but that would be my guess, at least from, what the person is saying.
I'm gonna throw you a question. Okay, so you arrive as a metal builder. Concrete's bigger than the dimensions you have, and let's just say this is a pre-engineered metal building. It's already been fabricated. Would we say that's still the concrete's fault, or is that still there's some fault into the metal builder?
I think it depends on the type of construction. As far as let's say a tubular building, the installers show up, and let's say you're talking this is a 40 by 40 building, right? Well, I need 40 by 40. If I show up and it's 40 by 6 with 40 by 6, we're good.
Okay.
You know what I mean? That would probably be the mentality of a lot of installers, to just say, or installers for metal builders, like, hey, I got what I need. So, most guys would just go up and put it on, and hey, that's great, right?
Would you say then if it would be, the metal builders should know or understand that if they build something, say it's a 40 with 40 by 6 with 6, and they build that building, which is a 40 by 40, we got 6 inches all the way around, that the water is going to come in, especially if it's flat, no notch detail, no brick ledge, notch edges, because that's exactly what happened here, because they put some flex or seal or caulking around it. Would you say that metal builder that understands what the whole project entails should do something different?
So I think it depends. Like right there, a 40 by 6 by 40 by 6, you got 3 inches. And I have to correct the math there. So
okay,
they don't eat us alive in the comments.
Yeah, it is true.
But I think it depends. For the most part, it just depends. It depends on who you're using, right? So there's some guys that they just worry about the metal building and that's it. They never come back afterwards, so they don't maybe experience these problems. So some guys would just put it up and forget about it, right? Hey, that's a concrete problem. Let's move on. Some guys would be like, hey, we have this issue. If I proceed, this is what's going to happen. These are issues you're going to have. Now, a lot of people won't do that. Why? Because let's say the building's, like you said, it's already fabricated. It's going to take either modification time, so you just had a dry run out there. You can't install the building, right? Maybe you got to modify it. You got to do some things to the slab. That's going to take time. So now you probably just lost a whole day, things like that. So it just depends on who you're using, right? And I think that's what makes it. Another thing, well, I was going to say, if you're doing, because you're talking about PEMBs, if the bolts are wrong, definitely, and if you're getting a PMB and something like this comes up, stop it. If the bolts are wrong, I've seen cases where bolts are wrong and people just let their builder do whatever, try to adjust it. Get an engineer involved, because, it's very important on those bolts to be set right and they're embedded. So
when you mean PMB, what we're talking about is a red iron bolt up. The anchor bolts are pre-embedded during the concrete process. So that's another issue that can arise. But like in this specific case, we're not exactly sure if it's a tubular building or a red iron. I know with weld ups, they're fabricated on site, so there's a lot of modifications you can do to make it happen. So that's the beauty of a weld up. As far as a tubular building, in this case, if that was the case, if the slab was bigger than what it needs to be, it would have cost a lot to the loss of the day, going back, refabricating the truss sizes to make it where it sits perfectly for that slab. Now, let's turn over to our concrete manager, Willie. Willie, who's at fault here? What's going on? What do you think about the issue at stake?
So I do agree with Jared. It's mostly the concrete guy's fault. Just because the notch detail is the most important to keep water seepage out.
Mm.
So they did mention that they've put some sealant around the building. However, that's only temporary. That won't last, especially if it's in the corners of the building where it's exposed to weather, or there's the level of the building is not fully perfect, which it never is. So
Yeah.
but then again, concrete guys, based on my experience, sometimes we get clients that are like, hey, just build me a 40 by 40 pad, no blueprints, no nothing. Shoot your levels flat. We don't know what it's for. If it's for, it has brick, for tin lip for metal building, or if it's just simply just a regular stucco. You don't need any notch detailing for that. So it can be anybody's fault here.
Because I know you have experience with concrete. Sorry, you have experience with from a concrete contractor, because that you used to do that.
Yeah.
And so that could have been a miscommunication also issue. Then is what you're saying. Basically, maybe there wasn't more details. There wasn't specifications given to the concrete contractor about how to do the concrete accordingly.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I got a question for you, Willie. All that little stuff, right? So I'm assuming, if I was a client and I asked you, hey, 40 by 40 slab, sorry, we'll probably get into maybe a little bit more detail, but a 40 by 40 slab, I said, hey, I need a 40 by 40 for a metal building. And how often would a concrete contractor ask, well, what are you using it for? The reason I ask is because tin ledge, like that 1.5 by 1.5 notch, I'm assuming that's a lot more work on the framing, and something you got to factor your bid into, right? Now it's technically a bigger slab. All that takes time, right? Little things like that. Like how often would you find, if a customer asked the concrete guy for a 40 by 40 slab, that they would ask that? I know that's very probably subjective, but the reason I say that is I can say in at least the metal building industry, it's not very rare. I feel like nowadays it's become a little bit more common knowledge. But a lot of guys, just like I said, they install the building and they could care less what issues might arise.
So it's very often only because most concrete guys are, they just go based off whatever detail the client gives them most of the time. So if the client doesn't give them I specifically want a notch detail or something, or like a door notch detail, they just say whatever, it's just a square. That's what we're going to give them,
Pretty common then?
Yeah, it's pretty common. Very common, actually.
So really?
Yeah.
Well, the reason I want to say that is for any people at home, let's say maybe your building is 6 months, 1 year down the line. It might be, and even if we're not doing your building, or if we are, don't worry about it. Good point. Well, it depends, right? If we're not doing your concrete, I guess is the more.
Yeah, because we've run into that. We've run into solving problems, and we've run into that, solving problems where concrete was not done right or done by someone else, and us having to make the adjustments for it to make sure that our client doesn't go through this type of scenario.
Yeah. So the reason I say that is if you are in the market, start talking to at least who at least maybe 3 or 4 metal builders that you might be considering, just to see what they recommend you, even if you're not even ready for 6 months to a year. The reason I say that is, a lot of customers come to us and they're like, hey, I want a building, and, their concrete's already wrong. So we're already off to a bad start, So sometimes it's important just to at least start talking to your builder first. Some people just get the concrete poured and then they want to do the building after, but they haven't even communicated with the builders.
That is very important common. So we've gone through it because a lot of times this is what happens. So if you're building a home, you're building a brand new home, your metal build your home builder usually can give you a really great deal to just pour the driveway and might as well pour the concrete because it will be less costly because you're pouring all at once. And so we've gone through that where, already got my pad built last year when I built my home, or I got it built 6 months ago when I built my home, and now I'm looking into the metal building. This is so common. And we've had to solve a couple problems with that. Tin ledge or the brick ledge or the notch edge. Your door notch detail is extremely important. Those are the problems we've had to solve. And that's what we're going to be talking about in the last thing is what do we do to solve it? But it is probably an issue. I mean, even this situation, it could have been something similar to that. You build your foundation for your metal building, before you even have a metal building plan, a nice blueprint on how to do it to make sure that you don't have the problem that's happening here. So just to summarize, the Flex Seal or whatever they're putting around the building, that's not a long-term solution. And then definitely on your doors, anything he does right now, it's only gonna be like a temporary solution. The sun, the weather outside definitely beats up that caulk after a couple of years. Now, it's very easy to blame, the last person is very easy to blame. Oh, is the metal builder or is the concrete? But at the end of the day, it's still almost everyone's fault, including possibly even the client. So, and we're going to get into it a little bit more. This is also why we got into concrete. And so I wouldn't say you were just saying we're not just a metal builder, but we also do a lot of concrete, and we just do, concrete on our metal buildings for this specific reason. Now we go into how would we solve the issue at stake. This is just the client calls us and he says, hey, this is what's going on. How would we solve their problem? From a metal building perspective, what can you do?
I just wouldn't return their calls. No, I mean, it's a little hard. The only thing I could do to help would maybe be install a stationary door seal. That's the one that, I mean, there's a weather stripping that's on the door, but as you open and close your door, it kind of, moves with it. And, when you have it down, it compresses, and that's what helps keep water out. But it's obviously going in through the corners of the door. So,
and sometimes that bottom concrete is not fully level.
And there's maybe some vapes or something. Yeah. So that's the challenging part. As far as that universal threshold too, it's something that stays stationary. Mm-hmm. So, it stays on the concrete, it's sealed down, and it helps kind of keep it from going in on the corners of the doors. I can't say it's a permanent solution because you're probably gonna have to replace it here and there. The good thing is it's not that expensive.
Yeah,
you can order a kit from Amazon or Home Depot, and
like $200-$300.
Yeah, you can install it yourself. So
we've installed it for a couple of clients that got their own concrete, and we said, well, all right, we'll do this solution, and it did help them. So now, is it a permanent solution? Probably not. Especially in the corners, like you're mentioning, the corners of your garage doors. Even the client here is mentioning that, or not necessarily our client, but the individual that posted that. What else, sir? I know you have another one in your sleeves.
I'm not going to go into that one. I'm going to let Willie maybe discuss. So what I would recommend is call your concrete guy back. I do have some as far as like maybe things that you can do, but I guess let's get Willie going as far as I have a question for you. Is it possible to maybe cut around the perimeter? I mean, it looks like it's only like maybe 3 inches or 4 inches wider, right? As far as the slab being bigger than the building. Is it possible to cut everything? Not everything, but for the most part, everything that's on the outside to
the excess.
Yeah, not on the same level as the finished floor. Because that's technically what a notch detail is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it definitely is possible. I guess just because it is such a short amount of extra.
Well, we don't know. It doesn't say if it's 3 inches, 4 inches, 5 inches, 6 inches, or a foot.
Okay, well, what I recommend, if it's 6 inches or less, you got more of a higher chance for your contractors to come back and cut it, easy.
Do like a little cut, like to
Detail.
create the notch.
Yeah.
Okay. Or a grind.
Yeah, or grind down almost like a little slope.
Okay.
But the more you're off on it, the wider it is, the harder it is to get a slope on it, just because you gotta keep lowering it, and you're gonna start getting into the rebar and into the footing and all that. So I don't think it's a good idea, but
that makes sense.
There is another solution whenever you just use your metal building for storage, or basically you're not using it for heavy equipment or any vehicles, which is a small cap on the whole inside of your building. You're basically we're going the other way around. Instead of cutting the outside, we're adding to the inside. So you still get that notch detail.
So is it the can you describe a little bit of that product? So it's basically like an overlay on top of the existing slab of the inside. So putting an overlay on top or something like that. Can you describe a little bit? But what if the water's still coming in and this overlay? Is there a problem because of the existing concrete and that what you're saying to add on top? How thick is it?
It would be 3 inches to 4 inches thick, just like a regular slab.
Okay.
But it would be just your regular mix, 3,500 PSI regular mix concrete. And you would actually put a concrete glue, which is also referred as I forget the word for it. It's a milky substance that, for concrete, stick to existing concrete. So you use those, and there's no issue of if there's still any water coming in, that concrete, really sticks to the existing one. And when it dries, it becomes almost like, a hole. So there's no cracks in the middle where.
I got a new question for you then. I one time built an office where, the slab was like, you're talking like a huge slab, right? And we built an office on it. No notch detail because we never planned to build this office. But I had issues where the water was coming in. And what we did was we poured like a 2-inch self-leveling, inside using the tubular buildings. They got that base rail underneath. We poured a 2-inch self-leveling. How do I say, like in between inside the building, and then we put tile over it. Okay, a stone tile, which kind of goes back to how you said, as long as you're not using it for heavy equipment. I don't know if we did that right. I mean, it lasted for us. I don't know if that was the right way to do it, but it lasted for us. It worked.
Yeah, it works really good whenever you cap over stuff. You can use. I've seen, just like you said right now, you explained to us the process of installing a floor, and that works really well too, because that's what happens in all the homes that are being built. The concrete slab, then you install your flooring. So that's just a everyday step, and it works. It's just this one that I explained was just concrete instead of flooring, but it works.
Nice, man. Is there any other solutions that can be done to help solve the problem? Can that grinding also be done on the door notch? Say they stick with, not doing anything. The perimeter, they solved it with their caulk. Now for your door, can that be grinded out, cut out?
Definitely can, because it can be grinded or cut out. There's plenty of product out there. Really, really good product to adjust to the smallest little details in concrete. Like you can shape up, something the size of this phone, and it would last longer than the whole slab with certain products out there. So I think it's very possible to have the whole door notch detail cut and then grind it and then patched.
Okay, awesome. Now, these solutions, some of these are pretty costly and they require a lot of work, a lot of time to fix. Jared, I do have a question for you. What about a base trim? Can that be solved on a metal building? I don't know if you wanted to talk about that or not.
It can. So the thing with the base trim is it has a backing on it. And that's the whole point of it, is that, it kind of goes like this, right? And, here's your sheet metal. The problem with that is the main concern is around the garage doors. That base trim would help
The perimeter.
around the perimeter, except you have a break in the base trim for your garage door. So you can, let's say your slab is 2 inches wider or all around or bigger all around. So going back to the 40 by 40, you have a 40'4" by 40'4" slab. Then you can install that wider base trim, where any water that gets on the panel, it comes down. It can't go back into the building because of that, bump up. Depending on the slab, if it's fully level and sometimes it'll just stay on the base trim or sometimes it'll kick out, right? It depends. But it's not really going to help with the doors. It'll help all around, but it won't really help with the doors.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. So the only permanent solution to not having seepage in your water inside your building is really your concrete work. Your concrete work, as long as it's done right, will prevent, and that's also grading around like a good drainage plan for your foundation, and then your NOS details all the way. Specifically, we say here, you basically get your shoes to fit your feet, and that's exactly the concrete should be made custom for your building. So at this point, whose fault is it? Would we say this is just a general, let's just keep it up there, maybe leave it in the comments? What do you think happened here? But at the end of the day, it does come down to a lot of communication, a lot of a plan for drainage, a plan for water seepage, and having that plan. So overall, the communication is the most important part. It's just really having a plan for drainage, which is the site preparation, because there can be water that can, if your spools up, it's just gonna find a way in. And then your perimeter, tin ledge, brick ledge, and your NOS details or ramp around for your garage doors. Okay, so now let's get into how does WolfSteel Buildings solve for this. So how do we prevent this, from happening to our product? So let's start with concrete. So what do we do?
So we make sure to always include a specific door notch detail, whether it's if it's for our red iron or for our tubular buildings, a notch detail all around our building. We make sure to adjust it if it's going to have brick or any type of masonry. We extend it to 5.5 to 6 inches to fit that. Because a lot of HOAs, require buildings to have a certain brick or a certain rock.
Yeah.
So we do that. We take care of that. Now, if there's, we also elevations, we make sure our elevations are perfect to where, let's say, you're from your street all the way to your building, it's like 100 feet.
Mm-hmm.
And you got a lot of fall going towards your building. We either raise it up a little bit, or if we can't raise it up, we adjust, the right drainage plan all around your building, starting with your actual, if you got a driveway, whatever, we take everything into consideration because concrete is mostly about finding where water will be going.
Dang. Not just having a solid foundation for a building to sit on, but it's also how do we prevent water from. So another question that has been brought up is so when you're looking at your site right now, your grade, your existing grade, when we come out there, we set a 2x4 form just as a standard above grade, which leaves that all our foundations start at about 3.5 to 4 inches above the existing grade. Is that correct?
Correct.
And that's more for drainage purposes. If you have water pooling or anything like that, you still have 4 inches where your slab is still sitting 4 inches above. I know some clients have been like, well, can you lower it so I can easily access? We can, but then that becomes a problem for water, right?
Correct. You can also look at it as if you ever want to extend your driveway connecting to your building or connecting to the ramp, the approaches we pour. If we do it directly level to the actual floor, to the ground, you're gonna have to, dig and take out a lot of dirt in order to connect. Make that happen. Connect that driveway. But the main purpose is for water. If you ever get flooded out there, or like you said, water is starting to pool up, there's no issues.
And that's the reason why, in most cases, we will almost require an approach, or at least doing an approach out of more dirt, more something that we can compact to be able to access, because we do leave most foundations, the finished floor elevation, about 4 inches above your existing grade, especially at your door points, your door entrances.
Correct.
Your main garage door. As far as building, what do we do to solve some of these problems to make sure that there's no water seepage under like that type of scenario?
Well, as far as like the garage doors, we started doing a J trim and U trim. We've always done on our red irons, but now we're actually implementing that into our tubular buildings, especially with heavy rainfall that we've been having lately
Here in Texas.
Yeah, so right now I think it's gonna rain later today, so it's raining always. But yeah, we switched that out for our L trim, so that's kind of created a lot of help where normally the water would just come into the L trim, it would come in here, and depending, it could find its way this way, right? But that's not necessarily the main help. We found that it helps a little bit, but it's not necessarily the main thing that we do.
That helps when clients get their own concrete. They don't do the door notch detail. It helps direct the water in front of the panel. But if we do the notch detail, that's why you're mentioning it doesn't fully help.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that we do is we try to, whenever mistakes are gonna happen. I think the biggest issue in construction is communication, right? Especially between like different trades, like I've seen sometimes, at least in like homes where, it's always funny. They say electricians never clean up after themselves, or, plumbers, they'll notch whatever, just to fit their, they'll notch whatever. I think there's like a certain code on like how much, on a upright stud you can notch, right? But, just certain trades don't really care because they're not communicating with themselves. It's always up to the person who's getting it built, which is usually the customer, or the builder, the home builder, which has to communicate with these GCs or with these subcontractors, right? So it's kind of the same thing here where, what we try to do is if something is wrong, we prefer to have, the adjustments made instead of us just like, hey, the building's up, we're good. Building side is good. Why? Because, the customer is going to come back and be like, hey, my building's flooding from the inside from water seepage. We can't just go like, well, talk to your concrete guy. He's like, well, y'all did my concrete.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's, what we try to do is if anything goes wrong, before us just installing the building and forgetting about it, we obviously try to make any modifications. Sometimes we adjust the building. In those cases, like sometimes, let's say a customer is getting a 24 by 30, we'll go out, inspect the slab, right? And it'll come out to 24.2 by 30.2. This is if they're getting their own slab, right? And what we'll do is we'll adjust the building to fit the building, or we'll fit the slab. Now, obviously, if we're doing the concrete, if any modifications need to be made, we'll make those modifications. So we tried to make sure that the building really fits. Sometimes I think the biggest adjustment is, Willie, you can agree with me here, is usually the garage doors adjusting the notch.
So
Yeah.
so here's so kind of what Jared piggybacking off of what Jared's saying is, that's why we do offer, if our client is getting their own concrete, we offer the concrete foundation inspection. That usually costs around $450. And what that does is that we send one of our coordinators to your site and we measure your slab. We measure your existing slab, and when we measure, we are basically preventing these type of scenarios, because at that point we'll see, like, we've gone and it's like there's no door notches, and unfortunately we can't really do much about it, but we can do some like cutting something. But usually what we can do, and that does solve a lot, is the measurement of making the frame exactly what needs to be to make sure you're not having any water seepage. Okay, so that's usually the you have a pointer?
Well, I was going to say we don't necessarily prevent it, but we do try to find methods to help avoid it. So sometimes if the slab is really big, we'll install like a seal between the base rail and the concrete, or that bigger base trim or things like that. When we go out there, we're checking for level, we're checking for square, we're checking for dimensions. That way we can see, like how you said, if the building has to be adjusted. And sometimes, that involves making the building bigger or certain things, right? So all we can really do, because now the concrete's already poured. If you really think about it, the concrete's already poured. All we're providing after that is options on how to minimize these problems.
Options, and some of them can be permanent, especially like making the adjustments of like doing the building and wrapping the panel over the concrete. But yeah, the permanent way is to have a concrete that is specifically made specifically for your building, and that's the adjustments that you're saying. Also, again, we do fabricate our own buildings out of here in Weatherford, Texas, and so it gives us that ability. Another reason, another thing that we get a lot of comments. Hey, why don't you service other states? We're not a dealer. We are our own. We're basically a contractor, and we put everything together. And so that's our responsibility. That's one of the advantages of what we offer is, and it's actually one of the reasons why we actually started doing concrete, because we were getting those calls of like these scenarios, and it was just really hard. Sometimes, it's really hard to let the other individual on the other side of the situation know, like, hey, unfortunately, some of these things are not our problem from a metal builder perspective. But now we do take that full responsibility. Now, already, Pat, thank you for sticking around. Again, if you have a topic that you would like for us to cover, leave them in the comments. We will be very selective. I know our next topic is on car lifts, because it is a question that we get asked a lot during the sales process. Car lifts, how do I do my concrete? How do I do the dimensions recommended? And how do I plan for that? So that's going to be the next episode of Metal Talks. By the way, if you enjoyed this video and you still have some maybe suggestions on how it could have been done better or anything like that, leave them in the comments. Again, we're really open to feedback, and that's what makes us better.
And as you know, we pull a lot of these questions from like social media, especially like Facebook groups. If you're in the market for a metal building, or you have a metal building and you got a lot of questions, or maybe you have some issues like this, right? Join our, the Texas Metal Garages. Feel free to join that group. And, if you have any questions and maybe you want us to discuss them, or maybe even for us to try to help out, or who knows, maybe other people in the community can help out. Feel free to join that group and post it on there, and it might be something we talk about.
Another thing is, the group, one of the biggest reasons why we really created is for inspiration. You're doing something in the inside, we just talked about car lifts, show how you're using your car lifts. People will start talking about it. There's other people that want to do something similar, or you can share and bounce off ideas. So again, thank you, Pac, for this episode number 2 complete. Willie, welcome to the channel.
Thank you
It's
very
going to
much.
be the last one. I'm pretty sure, because we got some other projects coming up that Willie is going to be a part of. Got so much knowledge in concrete. And Jared, like always,
Thank you.
and guys, we'll see you guys in the next one.
What's up, Pack? Remember to stay up to date with everything that we're up to by checking out our social media. You can find us at WolfSteel Buildings for behind the scenes action. We share our latest projects, update on what the team is working on, and all the exciting progress happening in real time. Don't miss out on the action, and remember to give us a follow.